Those standing, I think there are 3 or 4 or 5 chairs over on the other side. There's one chair up here at the front, and there's 3 or 4 over there if you would like to have those chairs. So
do you want me to escort somebody over there to those chairs? Do you want me to escort somebody over to those chairs? I'll be glad to. I'll drag them.
So we would again like to thank you for coming and hope that you are enjoying the activities to this point. The HOACGA display is on next door. The pies will be served after this. We understand that we do have 16 gooseberry pies this year, so there will be plenty of protection. So we are ready with gooseberry pies.
The meeting's adjourned.
So we take the important things first around. But we do want to thank Mr. Seufer and Mr. Fenton for putting on the program for us. I know that we will find it very informative and educational, as the intent of the program is. So I don't think that any of you need to be introduced to Mr. Fenton, but we again appreciate your coming and taking the time to be with us and put on the programs and for all the work that you do for the organizations. And Mr. Seufer, did he leave?
No. Come on. Oh.
We're going to turn the program over again to Frank and Mr. Seufer.
I really am delighted to be here. I planned to be here a year ago, but didn't work out, so I used last year's ticket to get here this year. We're going to do things here. I don't know for sure what Howard's going to do. He doesn't know what I'm going to do. And between the two of us, we ought to all be pretty well confused by the time this thing's over. I do need to make a couple of comments. One is that it's much more comfortable for me to bend over like this, and then maybe you can hear me a little better. I'm not sure if that's a problem. Well, it's comfortable for me, and also my glasses would look at my nose. Try to write out everything that I think I want to say, because I have a tendency to veer, and I go off in a different direction, and then I've lost my place, and I don't know where I am. And also, to save a little time, I'm going to stick to a portion of this, and when I turn it over to Howard, I'm a slight idea what he's going to
I don't either.
and every once in a while, he'll toss the ball back to me, and then I'll pick it up, and we'll go from there. We have some pieces like this that some people have that you want to ask questions about. This piece they've asked me about it, and I think I'll talk about it first, Howard, for just a moment, just to keep you awake early in the evening. It's got a hole in it right here. It looks like it's almost been drilled through. I would say that probably somebody stole the Fenton sample. We drill a hole in the sample so nobody will steal it. We put a label on it. That's the only explanation I have, is that there was a great big blister here, and somebody didn't like the blister in the piece. Would you say, Howard, from your observation of that hole, that it's been knocked out and drilled?
It certainly looks like it's been drilled. No.
It's also possible that in the crimping of it, that there was some damage, and the finisher stuck his tool into that particular spot, made the hole. But I think it's not been warmed in. Is it rough?
It's very rough, very rough.
Howard is our crack expert.
Tell me I might be
good. This is really odd.
I need to say to you that if you have a question that you want to ask him anytime, don't be afraid to interrupt us. I find that when I listen to somebody talk, I think of something, and then by the end of the talk, they put me to sleep, and I've forgotten what I want to ask a question about. So that I'll try to stick with my part of the script, at least partially. I'll hope we won't hear too much. I think from your newsletter that Howard and I are supposed to discuss some of the more common glass defects. That's what I think what the newsletter said. Manufacturing defects, internal cracks, and their cause, pigmentation, bubbles, and other defects. When we talked about this back home, Howard and I didn't want to do anything or say anything that would depreciate the value of those pieces that you already had. It's going to be a tough job, you see, to do that. But you're pretty knowledgeable and you know what's good and what isn't. I think that if you can keep two things in mind, it may keep you from getting your expectations too high for this evening. But first, just keep one thing in mind, and that is that there is no perfect piece of handmade glass. That's just about as clear as you can say it, particularly Fenton glass. It's a material that doesn't like to be pushed around, the glass. And what we do with it, as it comes out of a furnace, is sort of a round blob. And then we drop it into the mold, cut off a portion of it, and then we begin to push and pull and shove it around and force the glass into places that it doesn't want to go. That's essentially it. We had here I'm veering for a moment, we had a fellow named Bob Barber. Some Fenton collectors might know who Bob Barber is. He was a glass studio artist, and he worked for us back about 25 years ago in the 70s. And he told me one time that in working with the glass, he finds that the glass has its own way of where it wants to go. And that often when he tries to make a particular shape, the glass doesn't want to go that way. So then he says, I go the way the glass wants to go. And essentially, we can't afford to do that. We don't have the time that the glass studio artist has to make our pieces of glass, so we have to force that glass to where we want it to be. Of course, it might have been that he didn't have enough skill also. All of this stuff has to be done very quickly because the glass is chilling very rapidly. And as it chills, it sets up and it won't be movable again unless you warm it in and get it hot again. And of course, we do that too. So keep in mind that it's inherent in the process for the making of glass to have the various kinds of little marks that are passed upon what we do with it, based upon what we do with it. I can't see with these glasses. I've got to do the first page. There's a second item that I think is quite important, and that is that it's a little better if I get down here. Okay. And I'll try to stay here. Maybe I can see better. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think it's quite important that you keep that in mind. If the piece has beautiful color and iridescence, and this is what we were talking about this afternoon, it also has a little blemish of some kind in it. Many people can see only the beauty and the great color, and they don't really worry about that little blemish. Other people, beholding the same piece, see the little mark and forget all about the beauty of the piece. And all they can see is, when they look at that, they always got that hole in it. It's not. And I just think that's very difficult to live with. My house has a number of preferred seconds, pieces that the selectors have said are not acceptable. And I've seen them. The color was so beautiful, and the shape was just right. The pattern showed up beautifully. Because it had some little mark somewhere, they rejected it. So I take them home, I buy them cheap, and take them home and enjoy them. The workers that do this job, they're called selectors. They're really inspectors, and they're trained to look and find those blemishes. They're trained to see the little cracks, the little crystals, the various kind of things that our crack experts are going to talk about here. And when they do, then it becomes a judgment factor. Is this something that detracts from the beauty of the piece? And I've seen many, many times when they'll take a beautiful piece of glass, just wonderful, and it's got a little mark somewhere where the specifications say the mark shouldn't be. And so they put it over in the seconds or reject it. And at the same time, the next piece that comes along isn't nearly as nicely iridized, doesn't have quite as good a color, is not nearly as attractive, but doesn't have any blemish or mark on it. So he gets put in first quality and sent out. And that's one reason that many of our people in the gift shop, here I'm veering again, sorry.
All right.
Many of our people in the gift shop who come in to visit the shop where we have seconds will come up to us and say, what's wrong with this piece? Well, I can't see anything wrong with it. And sometimes I can't either. It's very different. So that, keep that in mind. The beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Let me give you an example. I have this little vase, which some people call that a jack-in-the-pulpit vase, a tulip vase. Howard didn't think to bring it with him, and I've carried it all the way on the airplane today so I could point to it over here. It's a very attractive little vase made by Fenton, not iridized. And when we make that shape, we have to pull that edge up. We have to force the glass to fit our design that we want. And when we do that, we grab a hold of it with a tool and pull it up and stretch it. And the people, a great many people, will look at that piece and look at the little mark that the tool makes on it, because it has to grab it just like a pair of pliers would, and it leaves a mark, and they think that there must be something wrong with it because it has that little mark. We explain, and then they keep it. They don't worry about it. Howard made a good suggestion to me yesterday. He says, why don't we put a little pattern on that tool and make a attractive little flower? Pull it up with that, and then it's got the pattern. So that's going back to the design committee. It's through the second page. I think probably one of the first things we ought to talk about is cracks. I'm going to read this to you if I can, the different kinds of cracks and what causes them and which ones are likely to someday end up with a defective piece that's falling apart as a result of the crack, and the kind that will probably last 100 years without hurting the piece at all. Let me set the stage a little bit for this for you. I had a letter not long ago from a man who bought one of our $750 reverse painted lamps. And he picked up the lamp one day. They were doing some changes in the dining room, and he'd set it aside. And he picked it up, and he heard a loud pop. And he wondered what that was, and he looked down, and there were some pieces of glass falling from his lamp. And so he wrote me a nice long letter explaining all the details of what had happened. And I wrote back to him and told him that it was possible that there was something wrong with the piece of glass, and would he pick up all those pieces and pack it all up and send it to me, and I would get our crack expert to look at it. So, should I keep on using that term?
Love it, yeah. Something I'm good at. You're good.
So he sent it to us, and we brought the piece along with us so that you could see it, and Howard could talk about it, and anything else he wants to. So this is my way to switch over to Howard.
Incidentally, that piece, Frank, can you hear this all right? That piece to me looks like that when it was formed, it pulled. That's what it looks like to me. If you notice, that's just a little shorter. And if you look on the back side, it looks like it was subjected to some heat. It's very sharp, and it probably was sitting there and then later got knocked out.
Can you hear him when he's turning looking at me?
Can you hear me now? I'll walk straight ahead. Just like I do at home. Let's review what Frank said about glass. For those of you, how many of you have not been to the factory? I mean, how many of you, forget the factory, how many of you have never seen hot glass gathered and formed? A couple. Oh, about a third. Floyd, you haven't? You're kidding. After all I've heard about you, back in West Virginia, you're a legend. The guy who has all kinds of one-of-a-kind, isn't that right? Yeah, okay. Well, let's just take a look at the short video. Frank said, and we'll go through it. Can you still hear me if I'm turned this way? Everybody hear me? We got it? Okay, let's go. We gather glass, we wind it up in a blob, take it over, drop it in a blob into a mold, and cut it off. Now I'm going to back this up just for a moment, hopefully. Oh, here we go. I didn't back it up. Wait a minute, let me just back it up here. Bear with me, please. There we go. Sure. There we go. Okay. God. Crack expert, but not a video. Where's my video man? There he is. Here we go. I'll get down here and pray. All right. We gather a gob of glass, basically in a ball, drop it in a mold, cut some off. See how he winds that up? Sometimes that causes lap marks. We'll get to those a little bit later. Now he drops in the mold. The fella cuts it off. You've heard of shear marks. Those of you who have plates know definitely what I'm talking about. Well, it didn't work again. Here we go. We go backwards a little bit. Okay, here we go. We'll get this before the speech is done. Here we go. He drops it in, and he cuts it off. He's eyeballing it. As he cuts it off, the shears chill. Now watch. Right there. And he... Well, I missed it anyway. Let's just watch it. What he does, he picks up the shears, cuts it off, and if you look closely, you see a tail up there. He cuts it, and then we call that a stomper in West Virginia. That's how we do stomping. And he pushes it back in the glass so you don't get those nice marks you've got in all that old Carnival ware. This is a press shop, obviously, because he's pressing ware. Now let's go over to the blow shop. In the blow shop, same thing. We gather glass in a blob. Here we go. We put into shape. In this case, we even put in water. And you can notice it boiling up. And if that's not enough, we take it over to the blower as soon as he gets that. And he reheats it. So we're heating it, cooling it, pushing it around. Watch him. He'll form it on the end of a cast iron plate called a marver. He'll stretch it down here so it fits in the mold. He's stretching it, and now he's going to form the basic lampshade shape. This, incidentally, is a Carnival piece. And now we even cut it off. If that were a person, we'd treat it rather shabbily, I would say. Okay. But before we get started, Since we heard so much of Floyd Whitley, I have a piece of glassware for you, Floyd. Would you come up and accept this, please? This is one of a kind.
Yes, sir.
This is the only one. Pick up. Floyd. Well, you can have it. That's okay. You see, now I got your attention. We're talking about cracks. And he knows what a cracked piece of glassware is. Isn't that right, Floyd? That's one of a kind. Now, just cracks 101. We're going to go just very quickly go through what a crack is. Glass is a brittle material. It's not like plastic. It's not like steel. If you take plastic, you can stretch it when you pull it. Glass won't move when you're pulling it until it fails. And it's very strong, about 5,000 pounds per square inch minimum. So glass only cracks when you're trying to pull it apart. And that's helpful to doing crack analysis because you think, now why is the glass being pulled apart at this point? As it's pulled apart, it fractures and it goes in a V shape into your piece, just in a V shape, very sharp edge going in. And that's why fractures are so deadly. That is cracked glass. Glass never, almost never, let's say never for all practical purposes, ever cracks on the inside. It always starts on the outside. Have anybody had a piece explode on them? Anybody at all? Just always cracks at one point. It's called the origin. And then it follows a path according to how much it's trying to be pulled apart. I mean, how much it's being pulled apart. Sometimes it'll just veer, sometimes it'll go all over. But if you analyze it, and that's what we had to do with that lampshade. And when Frank told me I was going to analyze a $750 lampshade, I thought there were better things to do, but he thought I should do it. And this is what it looked like. It's a reverse painted shade.
Put it on your head now.
That's a good idea. Everybody can see it then. And right here, I don't know how many of you can see arrows on that. There were 5 pieces plus the big one. The big one was a good one. And those arrows are the way we analyze glass fractures. You know the popularity of 3D puzzles nowadays? Well, that's what this is, a 3D puzzle. You take each piece and you look along it and determine which way the glass fracture was moving. You draw arrows on it, and then you follow the arrows all back to a common point. Then you look at that common point. Well, until I got right to that point, I was ready to tell Frank that somehow this fellow had impacted the shade. When I got to that point, we used a 3D microscope, and as you'll see shortly, we used some other analysis, didn't need it on this one. There was a plain surface, just plain mirror image, I mean just a mirror surface, about a 32nd of an inch long, up into the piece. And I had to tell Frank that this was a temperature fracture that the guy could not have caused. It probably happened the last time through the decorating layer when that cool piece happened to hit a very hot part on the belt, the steel belt, and then it stopped because of the rest of the heat. The piece started heating up. Went out there, and it was just waiting to happen. I had to call Frank and very reluctantly tell him that, yes, the fault was there when it was shipped. And I believe you send him another shade. Yes. But
We had to steal it from the gift shop.
pardon me?
He said he had to steal it from the gift shop.
That's right. He did steal from the gift shop. But the first, this is digressing a little bit, but the first time, they sent me to crack school. They did. My boss said I was going to crack school in New York. I said, New York City, wow. He said, no, New York up around Buffalo. I said, ooh, I'm not going. But his name is Tom Fenton, so I said, oh, all right. But I did go to the wine region, and Niagara Falls, I was there too. But I came back, gal in the gift shop said, a guy came in and he said his children were in the other room where the lampshade was, this poppy ball shade, and it just exploded. Could you analyze it? Well, being fresh out of school, of course I can, you know. So I said, have him bring all the pieces in. There must have been 50 pieces. And so 50 pieces, you go around like this, you know, looking for arrows and arrows. Then you take a little Scotch tape and try to find the one that fits. I get the whole thing together. It took about 3 hours. And then I called up the lady in the gift shop, Ann Stull, for those of you who might know her. I said, Ann, I know what it is. Is he out there? She says, yes. And he comes in, he says, he started telling me how the kids were just sitting there and so forth. I said, well, he might have been. But I said, see all these lines, all these arrows going this way, this point? Somebody hit that with something very sharp and very hard. And the expletives came out, kids, expletive, expletive, expletive. But that's what we can do. But that's going too far. You're not really that much interested in cracks, but I thought I'd tell you that it always happens when you're trying to pull it apart. Never in compression, never pushing glass together. It doesn't crack that way. If you push it together somewhere, if it cracks, there's tension on the inside, perhaps. Now, in your glassware, I've been looking at all the pieces that I could. You have something, some of you people call them heat checks instead of cracks. A crack is a crack, like he's got cracks. Cracks go all the way through the piece. A heat check, if you've got a piece of glass that wide, let's say on the edge of a plate, and you got a mark around the outside, and it looks like a crack, we call that a check. And the way that happens usually is as the glass is being forced up and it hits the top of the mold, and we call it the ring, as it is, the outside glass is chilling. It's chilling. The inside is still moving and molten. If we continue the force, and this was too cold, you get the fracture. And then the fracture, what happens, the glass is up like this, and then it's pulled apart this way. And then the molten glass finally grabs hold of it, and it's healed. We get that a lot on bells, I believe, on the bottom of our bells. And they're called checks. We don't call them heat checks. We don't call any other kind of checks. They are just checks, and they are not deadly. Not deadly to you, unless the appearance, you don't like the appearance. Something else is called a crizzle. I have one piece here that's got 2 crizzles in it. If you look closely enough, you'll see them in here. They're very similar to checks. That is, the glass, as it's being formed, chills, and then the mold or the plunger causes some motion that causes the glass to crack. Instead of being straight, these are straight, but most of them are like lightning marks. And again, the molten glass on the inside holds it. And I would think in a lot of your older pieces, you'll see a lot of crizzles. We call them crizzles, C-R-I-Z-Z-L-E. They're not deadly. They're healed. They're not going to go anywhere. Lap marks. You know what lap marks are? How many know what lap marks are? How many care? No wonder. Oh, there is one story. Can I digress one more time, Bob? Sure. Okay, on his story about the explosion. I was watching Robert Stack's Unexplained Mysteries or Mystery? What was that?
Unsolved Mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries. And they said about these 5 guys playing poker in a cabin up in the woods. Nobody was near the mantle. And there was an ashtray on top of there. And all of a sudden, while they're playing cards, boom, and it went all across the room. Do you suppose it was a ghost? Do you know what it was? It was probably a foreign object in there we call a stone. Probably a very large one. It's probably an opaque piece of glassware. So that might have been your case. It might have been a foreign object on the inside. In fact, if you looked through it, you might find a little white object. I want to go to the video, if I can get this running. Thank you. In doing analysis, I can't look at a piece that's cracked from the outside and tell you what happened. There's no way to do it. You can guess, and boy, they sure guessed a lot until they sent me to school. And then sometimes they really asked me what happened. But what you have to do, you have to cut in and look at the fractured surface. Just like a fireman, the fire inspectors, to see where the fire started. That's all we're doing in crack analysis. But we use a 3D microscope so we can see those fine lines. If you look at those pieces sometime later, you'll see like ripples. That's the way just like when you drop a stone in a pebble in a pool, see ripples? That's the same thing. And you just follow them back to the origin, and then you look at it. If you have a fracture in your glassware that you're concerned about, or a check that you think, boy, this might go further, I'd suggest here's the way you handle it. Don't subject it to extremely high temperatures. Don't subject it to sudden changes in temperature. You can go low with your temperatures. Also, don't scuff the glass. We have punch bowls that would break occasionally because of the ice that hit them. But the ice shouldn't have done it. But when they came in, we found out that they were using steel tools for mixing it over, and there was all kinds of scuffs. And when you break the surface of the glass, you lower its resistance, and then it can crack very easily. One of the things we do, we take a cracked piece of glassware, immerse it in a oil which has a penetrant and a dye which fluoresces just like topaz will, or Vaseline glass under black light. And here's a short video of it. This piece is cracked. You can't see it, but now, if you look, here's a black light coming in, and the fracture comes down here, and then down and across the bottom. Here, you can see it right here. Pardon me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be in your way. Here, you see it here? Sometimes we have to use that to find the extent so that we're careful when we cut into it so that we can get the whole fracture cut away and find out what happened. This one only had a very small fracture. Frank talked about our selectors who check our quality of our glassware. Their eyes are fantastic. They saw this, I couldn't, I put it in a black light. You really can't see it in this video because it just didn't take that well. Here we go. Okay. I would like to, however, if Floyd doesn't mind, here's a piece of silver, one of a kind, Fenton, Carnival. They told me you collect one of a kind, and I think I've got all of $4 in this. But I thought it's a beautiful piece, I think, and I thought you might like it. Yes, sir.
And I've got a real good insurance policy. If you'll appraise this for me, I might get some money.
I'm sure it's worth at least $5.
About the broken.
Oh, the broken one. That piece is the one I just showed you up there. That big one. I just couldn't resist if you didn't mind. Thank you. Frank, you want to take her?
I was just reading my instructions. It says here that after Howard talks about the cracks and maybe shows them about the Zyglow, that's the material that he uses with the ultraviolet light. When he's completely through with cracks, he'll turn the remarks back to me, and then I'll start from here. Now I have to see what I was going to say. You have to begin to talk a little bit about shear marks or straw marks, as some people call them, laps and blisters and seeds and the various kinds of things that are in the glass that are not likely to affect the long-range life of the glass, but may be considered unacceptable by some people if they're in the wrong location or the wrong size. A shear mark is usually found on the inside of the piece of glass. Howard has some video on shear marks, but let me go on for just a moment. The name of it, of course, is descriptive of what it is. It's when the presser cuts off the glass The shears that he uses to cut it, chill the glass, chill the edges of the glass. He does it. And then if he doesn't pay attention to what he does with that, if he just lets it drop down in without doing anything about it, it will leave a shear mark. When the plunger comes down on it, it leaves that mark. You'll see lots of old pieces of Fenton glass, lots of Fenton plates, others that have shear marks right in the middle. They're always in the inside of the glass, not on the outside. Once in a long while, the shear mark can find its way over the outside, but it has to be a terrible thing that the guy did to it to have that happen. And the objective is when you gather a piece of glass, the gatherer, if he's doing his job right, will drop a gob of glass and it'll stretch out so there's just a wee little bit of glass that the presser has to shear it through. So that the shear mark, even if it's there, is very small. And if the gatherer isn't as good as he ought to be, and if the pressure is better than maybe you can expect, he'll be able to judge that the gatherer has given him a little too much glass, and he'll cut lower on that, which is wider, makes a wider mark. And we will not permit our people to be paid for pieces that have shear marks in them today. But back in the teens and the 20s, when we were making all this beautiful carnival, shear marks were just a thing that was considered acceptable. But along in the 50s, we began to worry about shear marks, so finally we just passed the word along, we won't accept any more shear marks. And the pressers fixed it. It takes a little more trouble for him as he cuts it. If he throws it to the side at the same time that he cuts, it takes a little extra effort and a little bit extra attention. He can hide that shear mark. And then if he uses this piece that Howard talks about, what'd you call that?
I forget
The stamper?
Alzheimer's.
He has it right on the end of his shears.
Stomper.
When he cuts off with his shears, then he reaches right down in and he has that attached to the handle of his shear. And he'll just rub that like that and it gets rid of the shear mark immediately. And once we got them to learn that was not acceptable and here's a way to get around it so that you won't show, but then we began to make them done. Every once in a while somebody doesn't do it right, a shear mark comes through and the girls are instructed to put it in the sides. It's not a first quality piece today, but it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. All right, I got clear off the track. Let me see if I can do that.
Quite a crowd.
I think it's your turn again, isn't it?
We're going to talk about the fellows coming with all their baggage.
Oh, yeah. Howard liked this comment so well.
Yeah. He's good. I love him.
First I talked about a lap, Howard. I'll talk about the lap.
Okay.
He's already told you that it's a gob of glass that when it comes down into the mold may have a fairly small opening and it's hard for him to hit it just exactly every time. Sometimes the glass will hit the side of the mold as it drops in. When it does that, it folds over on itself and it makes a little mark in there, which we call a lap. And a good gatherer shouldn't have more than a couple of laps out of every 100. But sometimes they have more, and it depends upon how long the lap is, whether we'll accept it. A short lap or a small one, or one that's in a figured pattern where it doesn't disfigure, we accept it as a first quality piece. But if it's in a perfectly plain piece and you've got a lap there, we think that's not acceptable, so we reject it or make it a second. Howard told me that I made a comment about our workers. Really, the whole man comes to work, or the whole woman comes to work. And they bring their troubles and their problems with them, or their hangovers, or whatever. And some days they don't do as well as they do other days because it's a handmade piece of glass, and the worker has other things on his mind, and he doesn't he just doesn't pay attention. That's why the selector's there. And of course, if he's also trying to learn, if he's new and being trained with him, that's another problem we have with him. I don't know, I think probably that I can stand here all day and tell you about how tough the glass business is. I could say a comment about the piece that we made for your souvenir, the two-handle loving cup. We just had all kinds of trouble with that, making it in clear crystal, and we thought we were just going great, and when we came out the other end of the litter, those smart selectors who can see the cracks, saw the cracks, and they were cracked. And so we had to keep making them, until we got enough of them for you to have them. Losing a great many of them and trying all kinds of different things. You solve one problem, and then the things you do to solve that problem cause something else to happen that you didn't expect. If you put too much heat on in order to make sure that it's going to work right, then it goes out of shape, or it does something else. So it's a balanced thing that we have when we're trying to make things like this, particularly this piece, which we haven't made since 1983. Incidentally, I brought back that sample piece with me. You can auction it off Friday night if you'd like. That is a decorated piece, one of a kind, Floyd. And it has, instead of being 1998, it's 1983. It's 1983 on it in the clear crystal with a decoration on it. So you'll see it in the auction. I'll bid against you. I think you paid for that piece is the reason I brought it back. I told him to send it back to us so we know what we had done. And I think he forgot about it, I'm not sure. Okay, hard, I'm veering. Another characteristic of handmade glass is that you'll see bubbles in the glass. And Howard can tell you all about that, but I do want to say to you that bubbles are caused by the fault of the workman sometimes, or sometimes it's the construction of the mold that causes it to happen. As the glass flows through the mold, it'll trap air in there until then we try to change the mold so the air has another way to get out so it won't trap. And then another way, of course, is the bubble is a small bubble. It's what we call a seed. Am I taking your thunder?
Not at all.
Okay. And the seed, a very small bubble, is inherent in the melting process. And when you melt the glass, when it's almost ready to be worked, it's at the last stages, it's got lots of wee tiny little bubbles in it. And we have to get the glass hot enough for those bubbles to come up to the top and get worked out. And on some glasses, we can't get quite that hot, so we put a material in the glass that volatilizes at a very high temperature. So that at the right time, when you reach that temperature and the bubbles should be coming out and they're not, this material volatilizes. It's called a fining agent, and comes up in great big bubbles and it washes all the little ones out. And that's part of the technology of it, but it is a reason for bubbles to be in the glass once in a while. Howard, maybe you better take it over.
Oh.
Is this the right spot?
Fine, we'll be back, all right?
Okay.
Let's see, am I forward okay? All right. Frank was talking about the guy gathering. I don't know if how many of you know this is a gathering rod. We call it a punty, spelled P-U-N-T-I-L. The reason it's so long is he's up against the furnace and sometimes way down in there. So the reason they're so long is to keep him cool. But you can't necessarily be cool and do the job. I saw several people had town pumps pieces here. Would you stand up, Janet, for me? I want you to help me out. Turn around, come on.
Okay.
Okay. How big what's the diameter of a town pump?
Oh, about like that.
You want to tilt it that way so everybody can see you? Okay. Hold it up a little higher. Hold up right about there. It's about like that. Okay. Here's this fellow over here. He's gathering glass. He has about that much glass on it, and it's going to drop in a ball right into there. What do you think the chances are of not hitting the side? 75%. Thank you, because when you allowed us to hit the side of your... Oh, don't tell me you turned it off.
I kicked the side, I'm sorry.
While he's doing that, one point I'm making is a lap mark. That's one way. In fact, the most frequent manner that lap marks are made are the gob of glass hitting the side of the mold, chilling slightly. As it falls in, it's got a dimple in it, a line dimple. And then when you come back on, when you come back and press it, it doesn't fill out all the way. So a lap, and you see a number of pieces that have them. If you look close enough, you can find lots of the narrow pieces have them. It's like you took your fingernail into an apple skin. It's got a rolled edge to it, and it's kind of curved. That's what a lap mark looks like. It's also caused when the fellow, in wrapping the glass up on the end of this punty, he wraps it in layers. If the presser isn't ready for him for some reason or another, he's doing a dance out here like this, and those layers of glass are sliding back and forth, and the outer skin is being chilled. So one of the causes, other than the major one of hitting the side of the mold, is the way he gathers, especially if he's got cold glass. If he has extremely hot glass, one of our gatherers told me, if he got extremely hot glass, his problem is it falls in and it hits different sides of the mold, even on a big mold, and sometimes you get laps. What I brought with us are some actual samples that we use in production of pieces that our selectors use. And one of these pieces right here has a very bad lap mark. And we use visual samples as well as written samples. We might write on this piece, on the side, we'll take a lap 1 inch long, a light lap. Well, we don't have any tools to measure how deep that lap is, that mark. So we use visual samples. And we won't go into it, but at Fenton, we have a quality committee, and every week the decision's made daily. Once a week, the Fenton family and some of the manufacturing people review the quality control manager's decision and say right or wrong, and that's the way it goes. But up until that time, it says, you might look at all of these, there are color variations and so forth. But let's get back to the marks that look like cracks. Next one's a fill mark. Anybody got any spooners or creamers with a pressed handle? If you look closely at a pressed handle like this, you'll see a line. And if you twist in the light, it'll shine. What happened there, the glass when it was being filled, some of it went to the bottom of the handle, some went to the top and came down, and where they joined, they were chilling as they were going up. And when they hit together, the outside was chilled enough that it didn't completely fill. So you've got this depression in there that looks like a crack. But it's not a crack. It's no more of a crack than a check is. They're just shallow.
The loving cup will do that too.
The loving cup's got, absolutely the loving cup. That's a mark of handmade glass. We've been calling these defects. My goodness, I said we ought to call them features of handmade. When you see a lap mark, you can visualize that gatherer trying to hit that mold. Years ago, we made the town pump for, I don't know who it was, for some Carnival Glass Association. International. And I think Frank had it scheduled for what we call 2 turns, 8 hours production. And we must have made 7 or 8 turns because when people came in and saw them and the laps and so forth, much like the way worked out the problems on the loving cup this time. Believe me, you're getting a bargain at whatever you're paying for that loving cup. And the same was true of that very narrow town pump because it kept rejecting the lap marks. And when you see these different things, the shear mark, that's when a fella cuts off the tail of the glass. You know, just like this, just goes like this, just like this. Oh! You see how rough that is? Huh? Well, that's just the way your old Carnival pieces look. But Frank said, no, we don't do that anymore, not at Fenton. So, what do? We stomp it. And we make it look beautiful, Oh. No, Mary, I didn't tell you I was going to do this. Oh, I lost my glass. I'm going to have trouble reading. I hope I don't have to read. Well, that's good, right. Oh, thank you so much. Sorry about that. That's unplanned. The tie was planned. Are you going to keep the tie? Well, thank you. Would you like the other part? Oh, here you are. Oh, thank you. I knew it would work. Yes. Okay. You know what this is called? What's this called? Anybody?
Snap.
A what?
Snap.
Who said that? You said snap. He said louder.
Snap.
Snap. Yeah. Why is it a snap?
Well, you snap it along the...
That's right. You snap it on the Marie. My goodness, why do we come and talk to you people? Look at that. That's how you hold the glassware when you want to reform it after it's been pressed or blown. That's how you hold it. And what happens on your old Carnival? How many people have pieces that have no Carnival down here? Or it looks pretty rough, shall we say. It's a good word, rough. And sometimes you'll see a triangle here, and a triangle there. The reason is that the snap did not fit as tight as this one does. And that was perfectly all right. Like Frank says, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You got a beautiful piece, got a beautiful pattern, got a beautiful Carnival, then don't go picking apart these things. Start thinking, wow, I can just picture that guy when he took that piece and put it in the glory hole. Yeah. Build a little more legend in your glassware because it's there. These so-called defects, I think, are features, and they differentiate Fenton Art Glass and other people from the machine houses. People say, we had a pink glass full of streaks. You know how glass gets real streaky sometimes? And when they wind it up, and then when you get it, it swirls around. Some people say, I don't like that. It should be all pink. We made one purposely, I remember, 5-6 years ago, because handmade people could make that, because we swirled every piece. You couldn't do that in the machine house. I've got a handout I want to pass out, if you don't mind. You mind reading? We're not going to read during the thing. Something else called a flow mark. Yeah, please don't read them until, just pick them up. Okay. A flow mark. A flow mark is when the pattern in the mold disturbs the shaping of the piece. The glass goes in. The emperor's vase? Anybody know the emperor vase? Okay, or the deep roses pattern. Well, when the glass goes in and starts to fill them, it starts filling up in there. And the other glass is going up like this, and then finally it comes around and joins. And sometimes coming out of a heavy pattern, like a deep rose or something, on the sides of the piece, you'll see a mark. Looks like a crack. It's not a crack, it's called a flow mark. And here again, it's just like the fill mark on the handle. It's the glass chilled as it was going, and met and never got fully in contact. If you're going to look at a piece of glassware and say, I think this is a crack, one simple visual inspection would be this. Does it have sharp edges or does it have rolled edges? If that line has rolled edges, look closely. If you need a loop or something like that, look and see if it's got rolled edges. If it's got rolled edges, it wasn't a crack or a fracture. It was a flow mark, a lap mark, a fill mark, a tear. A crack should be absolutely sharp edged, as if you took a very thick roast beef, a sharp knife, and cut it. and then looked at that edge where you cut it, should be very sharp. That's what a fracture looks like, because it started on the outside and works its way in. Subtle ways, not getting away from cracks. Subtle ways, there's an example down here. You're welcome to look at all these later. Subtle waves are where it exists in pressed ware. And that's where the gob goes in and sits in the mold before it's moved. Where the top of that gob sat, or the outside edge of the gob sat, it will then skid. According to the temperature of the glass and temperature of the mold, it will skid. And on a lot of your plates, if you look, you should see kind of like a circle where the gob sat. It might be a little elongated, and a series of ripples. Those ripples are called settle waves. And that's part of handmade glass. We still haven't eliminated those yet.
You got some more videos you want to show?
I'm afraid to, but where is it? You don't trust me. I don't blame you. Yes, Frank. Here we go. This is some video shot in the museum. It's on a Peter Rabbit plate. Look at the shear mark. Look at the mold marks. Look at the lap marks. Settle waves. What'd you pay for that piece, Frank?
$1,800?
$1,800, yes. Look at this. Isn't this beautiful? A blueberry pattern. Isn't it? Yes, but look closely and you'll see a cord going up through there. Here again, you can see a guy winding the glass. It's beautiful. It's in the museum. I don't know what that is. I have no idea. More than $100. More than $100. But take this piece. Beautiful. What's that one with the daisies? Is that it? Or asters?
Oh, that's the little daisies.
Yes. Well, bring it up close. Look at that blister. It's almost big enough to be what we call a HOACGA. And there's a little seed. That's when the guy gathered it and trapped some air in the layers of glass. See, you look at your old Carnival. Old Carnival's so beautiful. In fact, every time we walk around, I buy another piece. I mean, lucky I got a checkbook with me. But as I look through these, I photographed, perhaps 50 pieces in the museum a couple of years ago, and I was appalled at what we now call defects. We don't allow them to get out of the factory that way, but that was the way these pieces were made, and you should appreciate it, because just like today, our company allows the fellows to bring all their baggage with them, all the problems they got, and you're different than you are, than you are, and you are. And if I give each one of you a snap and tell you to go to the glory hole and warm it in, you're going to warm it in a little bit more than she does, and you're going to look at the good-looking tourist guys coming through, and she's going to do her job right. But that's the way the variations come in, and you'll see some video here. Here we go. Let me just back up just a bit. Okay, and then okay. What you're seeing here, for those who don't know what. Okay, what you're seeing here is how Carnival glass is sprayed, how the Carnival is made. The fellow you're going to see is doing a very simple job. He's spraying Christmas trees. They're very simple, unlike most of the pieces you have. You see here? Got a mask and all that. But we heat the piece up and then spray it with metallic salt. Now watch this bell coming through, because this is the way the colors develop. First, on the stem you see silver, and if you look very quickly, you will see gold or yellow. Watch the silver come in. Here we come. There's the silver, and then the yellow, and then the blue, and then the green and reds. That's the way it comes in. That's why yours is silver. It never got to the rest. And I thought it was so beautiful, I couldn't turn it down. Frank? We'll show the production. Huh?
If you're pretty well covered there, I think maybe we ought to take any questions or pieces that they want to know about. They brought some pieces?
Yeah. Here's some here.
Yes.
read. You're going to have to read for me, Frank. My glass, I dropped my glasses. Oh, no, one's separate. Don't worry about it.
Somebody wants to know what color this Dugan diamond piece is.
Here you are.
He says, some say peach opalescent.
Thank you.
If so, is it a mistake, and why is it a mistake? Some say it looks like clam broth opalescent. Is it iridescent or not? Okay. I think it was intended to be peach opalescent. But my definition of clam broth is marigold that didn't come out. It was very lightly sprayed, and that's what I think clam broth is. You've all named it clam broth and identified it as another color, but I'm sure that the marigold that I think, the dark marigold, is the way it ought to be, and I think that this one just got very lightly sprayed, and it got to that point, to the gold, and really not quite hot enough. And the edges are not struck a whole lot, but there is a little bit of white around here. So I think it was intended to be peach opalescent. But I'm not sure that I would say that it was some of those I have in the museum. Did I answer that question?
I didn't quite catch the last What did you say? What was that last thing?
The last thing you said.
The last thing I said wasn't quite as nice as some of the peach opalescent pieces that I've got in the museum. Dude.
Did you do that, Floyd? Let me get back at me.
We've got a tumbler that Floyd had.
Oh, yeah, look at that. Is this your tumbler?
Yeah, I want to talk about quality control.
Well, it's beautiful. My goodness, I can see that without my glasses. Let's see. Oh, my. Yes, Frank.
He's concerned with that for lack.
Oh, about the lack of pattern?
This is a butterfly and berry tumbler. My man who's lost his glasses is looking for his type of defect, but this is something that was passed and was acceptable probably sometime in the 20s when it was made. It was first being made about 1911, 1910. Every 4 hours, sometimes they cheated and ran it for 8 hours, but usually every 4 hours, they would have to take the mold into the shop and clean off all the crud and the dirt that collects on it when they're pressing it. In other words, polish it again. It really needs to have a good polish on the mold. And every time they do that, they take a little bit of metal off the mold when you're polishing. And as they did that, they also sneaked over and took some of the design, some of the pattern out of it. So that this mold has very little pattern. You can see the berries, but you can't see the leaves in between, just where they used to be. And so it was really worked a lot longer than it should have been worked without making a new mold. That's what it is. It was acceptable then, and it's acceptable now as an old piece of glass, particularly since it's one of the early ones that Cecil acquired. In fact, I think that's the one that got her in the business. It would be one of the last ones made. That makes it very good. Any other questions? We don't want to prolong this.
How many molds would you make?
Well, today, if the mold got in that condition, we would have replaced it long before, and we would go back and make another mold. I have a little compote. It's a little tiny orange tree compote, I think you might call it. About this high, about that big around. We made it to 1911, 1912 in that period of time. Sometime in the early 20s, that mold got worn out enough or something was wrong with it and made a new mold for it. So that we know that a piece that I have that was made in 1926, was advertised in 1926, is substantially different from the other mold. Both of them supposed to be the same pattern. So that it does vary with the number of pressings and with how badly the presser might treat the mold. We have some pressers that can ruin the mold in just a short period of time. You give it to another presser and he'll take care of it. And won't get it too hot, won't bang it up and bang up the joints. The main thing that happens to mold is the joints go bad. And we sometimes let the joints get a little bit too outstanding, too bold before we make a new mold. And usually we don't polish them enough to take the pattern off. That piece had to have been made a great many times to have worn out that much pattern.
Frank?
Yes.
Frank? Okay.
Frank, I have a poly bowl, and I've seen this before. On the back side, it has what looks like arc welding spatter, that type of occurrence in the back. Just little splatters of glass on it. Do you have any explanation for that?
It has what again on the
Just
back?
like arc welding splatter looks. You know, there's a little spatters of glass.
Can you feel, is it raised?
Oh, yes.
Probably fine glass. Sounds like it to me.
On the back of the piece?
It should be on the inside, actually.
That's right. It gives it on the outside.
Is it, what type of piece is it?
Poly. It's a Fenton poly.
I mean, what type of piece? Tumbler?
No, it's a bowl. A whole bowl.
You'd have to see it.
I think you really have to see it to know what it is. We have sometimes down around the bottom of the piece, you'll get what we call fire cracks, which is where the mold has gotten so hot for so many different times that it finally, the metal just cracks, and you get little cracks in the metal. And when that happens, those get translated into the pattern of the glass. So you can see pieces that have fire cracks around the bottom. That's what you're talking about. It doesn't seem to be that.
I was wondering, so often on bond models, you'll notice the burn marks on the cans. Is there a reason that seems that occurs more often on standard?
Well, I would be inclined to think that it's what on iridized pieces, it's what we call overspray. The handle has got more spray than the rest of it has, and it has also been separated from the rest of the piece. It's chilled. It's gotten cold quicker, and then the spray won't take. Would you call that?
That's right. It almost looks like rust sometimes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the top of the handles on bonbons. We've got a video of the spraying if you'd like to see it. The actual, those two pieces that were pressed and blown. That comes up next. Anybody got any more questions at this time? Let's go to the video to show you.
We don't want to keep you here all night.
No.
We haven't had to
Here, to show you what the two pieces of it. You saw the gobs going down. Here we go. This is an E-perm bowl. Here we chill it. Like we said, we're also going to see how we mistreat the glassware. We chill it down here, take it over here, and he's got an oxygen torch. He's burning out the settle waves and the mold marks, it's already the mold joint marks. Then it's taken out by this gentleman on the end of a snap, and he puts it in a glory hole. If you'll watch closely up at the edge, you'll see it start to deform. When it's deforming, he takes it back out. I saw a piece someone showed me yesterday, had a little white thing on the edge of a piece. And that would have happened coming out of the glory hole. We call it stuck on the hole. Picked up a piece of refractory, a very old piece. It should have been okay. Notice the sparks. He's using a wooden paddle. That's an E-Pern mold. That's the finisher. Now it goes over to be heated so we can put the spray on it, the Carnival spray. Now this time you'll see more care taken because you got to do the outside and the inside, and you've got to eyeball it so the colors come out right. This is that new green, I believe, Frank.
Sea green.
Sea green?
Is it satin?
It's satin, yes. Well, right now it'll come out shiny, and then we'll put it through the heat on the other side so that we get the satin finish to the Carnival spray. I had someone the other day say, oh, and they saw pictures of old days where guys used to carry one thing in at a time. Just watch. This was shot last week. Yeah, it's going through. It's getting reheated, and that gives you that satin finish if you like satin finish instead of shiny. That's about this big. And then he takes it into the furnace, and all those stress has been pulled around temperature and pulled around over. It's got just like a real rotten headache. You put in the leer and needle it, and it's just like you wake up in the morning. Wow. That's why we do it. Now here's the lampshade. Notice that's where the overglow was. Now watch what we do with it. He knocks it off. There's it all that's sharp edged. And then he polishes it off on a piece of granite, goes in and melts the end of it over, and heats it up. The rest of it is still cool. Outside is getting fluid. Bring it over to the finisher. He opens it up with a carbon paddle, puts a crimp in it, and then he takes his pacellas, pinchers, and puts a tri-crimp in it after he folds it back first. So this is very hot. This is cold, relatively. So probably 400 or 500 different degrees difference from one end to the other. And this goes into a booth. Now in the old days, a lot of your Carnival class was done this way, but he had a foot pedal, so he didn't see what you were getting, what he was getting. Now we have somebody there, so you can. So that's why you had a lot of variation in your Carnival. Heat it up, and this person sprays it, and then it goes to the other side, and gets heated again, and then gets carried in to what we call the leer, L-E-H-R. And then there's other operations, the cold operations, sawing it off, grinding the bottom so we get a lampshade. I'm trying to lamp bulb through there. There we go, that's the local weather. I'd like to invite you later. These are actual production samples. Like I say, I'd have to give away my firstborn, but he's too big to give away. To get these out of the factory. These came from my glass chemist, Wayne King. These are his samples. And we're talking about variations and so-called defects, which I call features in handmade glass. This is decay or dusty rose glass. This is the standard color right here. This is the dark limit he will accept. This is the light limit. He puts the three of them together with the standard there, and he holds them up to the light, just like that. He holds them up to the light and looks through them. If you feel free to, but please let me have them going home or I'm not going home. He goes in the morning. They have the disc waiting from the furnace that morning to the pot. He takes that disc, takes the standard disc and looks, and if he has a question, it's too dark, he takes it too dark, and that one it says okay or not. These two pieces will show you the light limit and just a little outside the dark limit of that very same color. Just to give you some idea, you know, we go on and on about all the types of problems and variations. Here's two. We haven't even talked about what we look at. Frank says now we don't take shear marks. Right. Lap marks, we have to take some. But we don't take, like, again, Frank, we have standards so that we We determine, first off, is a lap mark in a plain area, a plain piece of glassware, like a crystal tumbler. Don't take it. Is it in a partial area, just a kind of a mild one, or is it in a full pattern area? And we'll have written specs to say how long and if we can take deep or shallow ones. But we also use visual specs. If you examine these two pieces, this is a reject for a lap mark, and this is an accept in a full pattern. The same with blisters, same with seeds, all those things. They can go on now. We passed out a handout to you. On there, hopefully, we've gone further than we have with our discussion so far. If you come in and break your head just a minute here. We're about finished. Okay, well, I never give a talk without giving away my favorite piece of glassware, a favorite shape. And the reason for that is I think this exemplifies, I don't even know I do this, but this exemplifies Fenton to me. I know it's not Carnival, I apologize in advance, and you don't have to accept this. Okay? But this started out looking like a plain milk glass cereal bowl. And then somebody put it in snap and took it over to a finisher and warmed this up. Somebody took a punny rod, not like that, but a little smaller, took some crystal glass and they put it on the edge of that cereal bowl and went around and spun crystal on it. Then, and cut it off. Then with the guy taking the snap, he goes in the glory hole, it's still round. He rotates it till it sags, brings it out. The fellow flares it out, puts it in the crimp, brings it up, it's still flat, and then he forms it into this, a circle. And then he takes it, he pulls this down, he pulls that down. Now we got a heart shape. Another fellow gets a punny with some crystal glass on there, brings it over, touches it to here, the handler pulls it around, makes this. And then when it's all done, this went down to the decorating department where Susie Bryan, a very skilled decorator, put this rose in there. And that is just for the person who on page 3 of their handout has a red heart shape that I placed it. And like I say, if you don't want to accept it, you don't have it. Is that you? Oh, come on up here. Bill Wilson?
Yeah.
This is Bill Wilson. You, it's all right to give this to you? It's not
Yeah, I can
Carnival.
put my wife.
Well, hey,
Right there.
I'd have brought her some candy and I know him. Up here, here I go for Bill. I want to look at page 3, right? Up here, this is what, of course, glass looks like when we make it. Then when we spray it, and these were made for the Australian Carnival Australian Carnival Enthusiast, ACE, not a bad name. So this is a sample before it's sprayed, here's after it's sprayed, and my goodness, why not have some variation? I don't know anybody who buys 3 coasters, but we're giving 3 coasters to the person who has 3 green rings on page 3. Come on up here. You wait a minute, you got them. Okay. You know, I did this one time. I put tags under chairs, and I said, you reach under there, and there's a tag, you bring it up, because that's why I gave away that piece. I just gave it away, and 2 others. A 4th lady came up, and she was as old as I am. And she had this tag. She tore that tag off underneath and said, don't tear off this tag. I was in a fix. Oh, Alan Pickup, what a name. What's your wife's first name? I'm curious. And the last name Pickup. Oh, easy. Oh, no. Oh, Lorraine. Oh, okay. There you go. Yes, sir. Now you can have company. there's an exception. On the page it talks about stones. I think it's the top of page 3. What's really important is the size of the stone. It's a very small stone. It's not going to hurt those refractory or bats as far as we know. If it's a bigger stone, now we're talking, it could be deadly, an explode your piece. And of course, in a opaque piece, you can't tell what's in there. You don't have any idea. But that should be a fairly good guide. It's like an introduction to features of handmade glass, or defects if you want to call it that. Frank, thank you.
Well, thanks, You've found the right guy at the right time. I just wanted to give you one more thing. I'm going to leave this up here for you to look at. This is Howard's report to me on that big shade. Anyone that couldn't get it through your ears might get it through your eyes when he was talking. So I'll put it up here so that you can see it. Yes.
I have one more question.
Right?
I have one question that you could answer for me. Howard talking about putting the glass in the layer where it cools down, it gets a needle. Well, we were at the Oval Bay Museum recently, and 2 glass workers were making souvenirs, and they were taking a gather of glass and then roll it in grit, put it in a spot mold. But when they get done, I swear to God, they put it in a deep freeze. Explain that.
Deep freeze was.
It's really not a deep freeze. It's a kiln. It's an electric kiln that provides the same kind of heat the Lear does, but doesn't have, and they leave it in there for a certain length of time.
Okay, well, I mean, it looks like a deep freeze.
It's like a deep freeze.
I don't
It's an electric
understand
kiln. Got the heat inside it,
Okay.
and then it cools down slowly, the same way that the kiln.
All right, that explains that.
If we might just embroider on that, what we do in the kiln is get that glass up to what we call a annealing temperature, somewhere around above 830, 850. We usually set our Lears around 1,000, I believe, close to that. So that every part of that at least gets exposed to that temperature. And then you start bringing it down slowly. So if you got something 500 degrees, 800 degrees, and so forth, you bring it all up above that temperature, and then it kind of lays down quietly, hopefully.
That takes the stress out of it.
Takes the stress out of it, yes. And we have ways on transparent glass to look at that under polariscope. I worked at Fenton for 29 years. It's a family organization. They give you a lot of slack. They give you a lot of individual expression. But they also have very latest technology. It's not obvious. Even though what you see, the operations are still the way they were made 100 years ago. We got electronic controls and that. We still do it basically the way it was done in the old days.
We appreciate very much your being willing to listen to us for all this time.
Nice phone, Alan. How'd you got it?
Thank you, Frank, again. Thank you, Howard, for the program. We enjoy it very much. We still have your glasses up here repaired again, Howard, so one announcement. Carol Curtis, Carol and Jerry will be in charge of the judging of